Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So if you haven't seen my most recent episode on Gisa, Glorious Resurrector, make sure you check that one out at some point to see exactly where Gisa's gonna end up on the SALT scale. Regardless, between that episode and right now, I decided to take a little nap because I've been up for quite some time working on these spoiler videos, and I was kind of tired. But now I am rested and rejuvenated, and the second I woke up and checked these spoilers, there's a brand new and exciting one, so I am wide awake thank you to that, my nap, and another cup of coffee. Now, it's probably just because I was out of it, from waking up from the nap at first, but I had to reread this card a couple of times, but I've got it down now, I promise. Or at least I hope I don't make any mistakes on it, but if I do, please comment below. So what exactly does this card do, and will I take another nap today? Well, let's jump into it to find out. So the card that I woke up to after my glorious nap was the Celestus. The Celestus is a legendary artifact for 3 mana, and it says, if it's neither day nor night, it becomes day as the Celestus enters the battlefield. And in case you haven't heard about this new day-night mechanic, we'll get to it here in a second, I promise. Regardless, it can tap to add 1 mana of any color, so this is a 3 mana rock that can tap for anything. On top of that, by paying 3, you can tap it, and if it's night, it becomes day. Otherwise, it becomes night. Activate only as a sorcery. So again, we'll get to the exact mechanic and how it works, but yeah, with this, you can switch between night and day. It also says, whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, you gain 1 life. You may draw a card if you do discard a card. So when things swap from night to day or day to night, you get free value. And 1 life in looting is nothing to sneeze at. Okay, wait, I just look up if that was a phrase. I forgot if it was. It apparently is a phrase. It's just a strange one that just sounded weird. Again, I just woke up. Let's keep going. Strange phrases aside, though, let's talk about the day and night mechanic really quick to talk about how often you can expect this free value. So, day basically says, if it becomes day or night or a day-bound permanent enters the battlefield, track day-night for the rest of the game. Again, when the Celestus enters the battlefield, if it's not day or night, it becomes day and then you start tracking it. As it becomes day, you transform all night-bound permanents. And if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. And then with night, night says, as it becomes night, transform all day-bound permanents. Permanents enter the battlefield night-bound. If a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day next turn. So throughout the game, it's bound to change between day and night when players either don't cast spells during their turn or cast 2 spells during their turn. I mean, it literally could just switch between day and night every single turn. Now, that's highly unlikely that, on one turn a player's not going to cast any spells, then the exact next turn someone's going to cast 2, then the next turn someone casts 0, and so on and so forth. But again, there are definitely going to be times when it switches between the 2. And again, because of that, even without having to activate the Celestus to switch it from night to day or day to night, you're getting free value. Because every single time that changes, you gain a life and you loot, again, just for free. This is essentially just, again, additional value on a 3 mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color. And again, if you've got extra mana on your turn and you want to activate this, you can, and then you gain a life and you loot. This is a mana rock that helps you with card selection and life gain. But it can also do one more pretty funny thing. Well, okay, kind of sad but funny. If you didn't see my episode from yesterday titled Finally, make sure you check it out. The reason that the thumbnail just says finally is because we finally have an exciting and powerful werewolf commander that players are going to want to build around. And now that there's going to be a lot of werewolf decks out there, you can use the Celestus to mess with them. Werewolf cards are pretty much exclusively more powerful when transformed and they're on the night side. But with the Celestis, you can mess with them and shift it from night to day. So have fun with that. But also conversely, Werewolf players are going to want this card themselves, because they can also shift it from night to day or day to night for whatever works for them. And I should mention that there are certain cards that benefit them when things transform, so yeah, there's that to consider too. Regardless, if you do have this just in your deck as a mana rock that can provide you some additional free value, and you happen to be playing against a Werewolf player, well, things can get really hairy. See what I did there with hairy because of Werewolf? Anyways, let's talk about if realistically this card will see play or should see play outside of just Werewolf tribal decks. To do that, let's start off by talking about some somewhat comparable mana rocks that are also at 3 mana. Now, I've said this before and I will say it again. I personally prefer mana rocks that give you at least half the amount of mana back that you put into them. So a mana rock that costs 3 and only taps for 1 does not do that, so it better be providing me a ton of utility to make up for that. So first up, let's talk about Commander Sphere, which costs 3, taps for 1 color in your commander's color identity, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. According to EDH Rec, this card sees play in a whopping 17% of eligible decks. And I personally think that this card is vastly overrated and overplayed. Regardless, between Commander Sphere and the Celestis, I think there is absolutely no comparison between the two. The Celestis is just superior. Yes, you don't know exactly when that value is coming, but the value that you get is free. When it swaps between day and night or night to day, you just get to gain a life and loot. And you get to keep the Celestis around. You don't have to sacrifice it for that value. Now, should the Celestis be played in 17% of decks like Commander Sphere currently is? No. But again, Commander Sphere, in my opinion, should not be played in anywhere near that amount either. Regardless, even the Lockets like Izzet Locket see play in a decent amount of decks. Izzet Locket specifically sees play in 4% of eligible decks, which with all the budget ramp available these days, I think has got to be a bit too high. The Lockets each tap for 1 of 2 colors, and you can pay 4 of either their colors and tap and sacrifice them to draw 2 cards. Again, you have to actually pay mana into this and then sacrifice it so you're losing your ramp to draw those cards. Whereas again, the value from the Celestis is just free. Now, the closest comparison to the Celestis might just be Midnight Clock. It taps for a blue and it has pay 2 and a blue, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. At the beginning of each upkeep, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. And when the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards, exile Midnight Clock. So, like the Celestis, you get this in play, and you can eventually just get free value out of it, essentially wheeling. If there are 4 opponents at the table, it's going to take you 3 trips around the table to actually get this for free. But again, a difference between the 2 cards is that you actually lose Midnight Clock. In fact, it gets exiled, so you can't get it back. Regardless, again, when it comes to mana rocks that give you extra utility, Midnight Clock gives you a good amount of utility like the Celestis does. Though Midnight Clock doesn't help you fix your mana, again, it just taps for blue instead of 1 mana of any color like the Celestis does. Next up, another somewhat comparable card is Pristine Talisman. This one sees play in 2% of eligible decks, it taps to add a colorless, and you gain 1 life. The Celestis is a lot better than this card. Again, the Celestis can help you fix your mana, whereas this can't, and the Celestis can actually gain you more than 1 life in a trip around the table on top of looting. And I have to bring this up because this card still somehow sees play, but everyone, please, Manolith, take it out of your decks. Unless you literally have a deck that is running every single mana rock possible, please, 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 please take it out. This card still sees play in over 5,000 decks, and like the Celestis, there are much more better options than it. Really quick though, 2 other comparable cards that I want to bring up aren't mana rocks at all, but they are Monastery Siege, which is an enchantment, and Gyreach Sanitarium, which is a legendary land. Monastery Siege has when it enters the battlefield, choose either Khans or Dragons, and typically the choice is gonna be Khans. Khans says at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card, then discard a card. Basically, your draw step, loot. Again, in a trip around the table, if it swaps between night and day just once, you get that same value and more with the Celestis. And though looting isn't card advantage, it is card selection, which can really help you out throughout the game. I mean, Gyreach Sanitarium is a great example of this, seeing play in 4% of eligible decks. Looting is powerful, and the Celestis is a mana rock that can loot for free. But now that we've talked about other cards that we can compare this to and evaluate the card, let's talk about some commanders that might want to utilize it. I mean, outside of the Werewolf commander, which I already mentioned anyways. How about Alluro Ageless Ascetic? Alluro loves life gain. He has, whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. Again, the Celestis is going to give you, although inconsistent, life gain throughout the game. So when you do gain that life, you can pay 1 to get some actual card advantage on top of your loot, and you drain your opponents. Next up, another commander that loves when you gain life is Dina Soul Steeper. She has, whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, Dina likes multiple instances of life gain, so even if it's just 1 life, that's great. More sources of life gain for Dina equals more punishment for your opponents. And speaking of punishing your opponents, let's talk about Brawlin Skyshark Rider. Brawlin has, whenever you discard a card, put a +1 counter on Brawlin Skyshark Rider, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So instead of punishing your opponents with that life gain, you're punishing them when you're looting and discarding that card. On top of that, you also grow Shabraz too, because it says whenever you draw a card, put a +1 counter on Shabraz the Sky Shark, and you gain 1 life. So essentially double benefits just from having a mana rock out there that occasionally loots for you. And speaking of a benefit from drawing, let's talk about the Locust God. It has, whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. So now your occasional looting essentially just makes you a creature token, which is fantastic. But you can also utilize that occasional looting for damage with something like Nimizit Perrin. It has, whenever you draw a card, Nimizit Perrin deals 1 damage to any target. And actually, Nimizit itself has a very restrictive casting cost, costing blue, 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 red, red, red. So yeah, having a mana rock that can tap for any color can really help you out. But now it's time for me to wrap things up and give you my final thoughts on the Celestis. Like many 3-mana rocks, this is an inefficient mana rock when it comes to the amount of mana that it gives you versus the amount of mana that you put into it. That being said, it makes up for that by providing you a lot of value, and a lot of free value at that. Now, you don't know exactly when those day-night cycles are going to shift, but they definitely will throughout the game. And again, if you really need to, you can force that shift by paying 3 and tapping it. Now, when it comes to decks that really need low-to-the-ground mana rocks, that doesn't mean you're just going to add this in because it provides you extra free value. Again, in most circumstances, I prefer mana rocks and mana ramp in general that gives you at least half the amount of mana back that you put into it. That being said, there are definitely decks out there that are still going to want this. Unfortunately, though, I'm not sure exactly how budget of a card this is going to be because, yeah, that Werewolf commander is probably going to be really popular, and like Eddie said, pretty much all those Werewolf decks are probably going to take it. So depending on how many Werewolf decks are out there, this card could get, well, out of, really budget-friendly consideration. Regardless, it's most definitely an interesting and unique card. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.